First, thank the board for being here this evening on Valentine's night, and also recognize you for your service. It's Board of Education Recognition Week this week. We have some nice posters that we're going to share with you at the regular meeting here in a couple of weeks, but I appreciate your service to the district and our community. I wanted to recognize that during Board Appreciation Week and recognize you for those efforts, and we'll do it again in 2 weeks. So thanks for all you do. And part of the things we get to celebrate is a good APR report. The annual performance report is published by DESE every year. Normally that happens in the early fall, late summer, early fall. The last few years it's kind of gotten a little more delayed, and this year it was extremely delayed to where it came out on February 1st. But once again, the district overall did a really nice job on our annual performance report from the state. I want to touch just briefly on a little bit of it tonight. It will kind of feed in then to our discussion about MAP results that also came out much later this year as well. If we look at our overall report, you'll see that we get 98.7% of the points. We lost a little bit of a few points in the math achievement area, both in our regular population and our subgroup population. But overall, in all areas, we're very strong collectively. Our history has been, this is, I believe, the 6th year of this MSIP cycle. We're in MSIP 5, 5th generation, and we were in the 93% range in the first year and have worked our way up to where the last 4 years we've been in the upper 98% range, which is a good thing. So our overall results are good. Michelle, if you'll scroll down to the second page, we'll talk just a little bit more in detail. So the achievement results are broken down to where traditionally half the points have been student achievement, and half the points have been attendance, graduation, and college and career readiness measures. Our student achievement measures overall continue to be fairly strong collectively, but we did lose points in math. So we lost some of our points in our total group of students in math results, and then our subgroup as well lost a little bit of traction, if you will. And we've been losing some subgroup points for a couple of years, so that's not necessarily new, but it's been the first time in a while that our total population has not achieved full points. You will notice that there are two different columns for 2018. There are actual points and adjusted points. The difference there is the actual points is just for this year, looking only at 1 year's data. The adjusted points looks over multiple years. In math and ELA, we've had 4 different assessments over the last 5 years. We had we had a year of what was the Common Core based assessment. We had, our old assessment, then a year of the Common Core based assessment, and then the legislature took action to not allow that to be used. We spent 2 years on an interim assessment that was just something that was purchased off the shelf, if you will, by our state. And then finally, last spring was our first year with the new assessments in math and English. You may recall some level of concern about MAP results and the fact that proficiency rates were down across the state. The new assessments in math and ELA were very rigorous, and the scoring on them was even more rigorous. So collectively, statewide scores went down. We overall held pretty decent in ELA, but we did see a significant drop in our math scores, and Dr. Volker will touch on that here in a little bit. So the actual points earned was for just 2018, but over the last several years, they've been allowing us, because of the changing tests, to take the best of those 4 or 5 years preceding. So we've been relying on 2014 was our best year that they were looking back to, and at this point, that gets weighed in. Those adjusted points, what they're trying to do is phase out those old test results. So we're getting some credit for higher test results in the past, so that's why in math you see a 14.7 on that second line instead of a 12.0. So our overall percentage with those hold harmless points included got us up to that 98.7%, but not for those, we'd have been at 95.8%, which is still a really good score, but not quite as high as we're used to. So the interesting thing is we're a very transitional period, even with the APR in total. They are in the process of finalizing MSIP 6 at the state level. The state board, I think, is going to be hearing about that next Tuesday, and it'll go through a rule process. So it could be that the next couple of years we get graded on both the old standards and the new standards as they transition into what's going to become MSIP 6. Overall, again, this is extremely good news. Again, the one area that we showed some weakness was our math scores, and Dr. Volker is going to address that for you. Very proud of our college and career readiness efforts. That was our low point whenever this M6 started. Dr. Barr has worked really closely with the secondary folks because at the high schools where most of those points, if not all of them, are generated. And so we've gone from getting like 23 and a half of those 30 points to now we've consistently been getting 30 of those points. And that has to do with your advanced courses, your assessments, what you do beyond high school on the follow-up survey after they get out, whether or not they're going on to college or career training or going to work in a related field. So all of those things play into those 30 points. And then attendance and graduation rate, we consistently get all those points. So that's a good thing. So that overall, again, we're, anytime you're in the upper 90s, that's a good score. We do have a rank listing in the folder for all the Kansas City metro districts, and we're up in the upper end of that as well. So with that overview, I'd be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.
You said statewide the math scores were down?
Math and English, yes.
What's the reasoning?
The test was more difficult, and it was scored in a more difficult way.
Both.
There was quite a bit of controversy on how they decided to score the test. So the test was given in the spring, like it always is, and there was a process over the summer to go through benchmarking and scoring those tests. And there was a committee process and a review process done at the state level, and they intentionally made the benchmarks harder to achieve to be considered proficient or advanced, or even a basic score was harder to get on the new assessment. So a lot of it has to do with how it was scored, more so than necessarily what our students knew or could show on the test.
Now, do we look at nationwide also?
Our test is not really truly comparable to nationwide. Our NWA results, we do have some more comparable data, so we'll talk a little bit about that.
And that's why the NWEA is helpful as well, because it's a broader scope. You're looking a little more nationwide with that. And we definitely will talk about that in a minute.
Any other questions I could answer about that? There was a newspaper article. I want to congratulate some of our neighbors because a lot of our neighboring districts did raise their scores and overall in the APR. And to Desi's credit, even though the test was harder, they accounted for that in the APR scoring guide to where they balanced it out to where you still could earn the points. Just because the test was harder, they reset those benchmarks as well to accommodate that harder test. So a lot of district scores went up. Our neighbor across the highway went up significantly. Congratulations to them. And the newspaper article, one of the local articles, really played that up. And at the very end, it said, oh, and by the way, Ray-Pec got another 98 point whatever score. So we get taken for granted, but it is nice to have outside confirmation that we're trying to do a good job here. So any other questions we could answer for you? All right. Next item is the assessment update. I think Dr. Volker is going to take lead on that.
Well, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. We're talking about, it does feel a little bit strange sitting in mid-February talking about last year's summative results. So what we are looking at occurred last year, was assessed last year, and we've really been working and moving on since then. And with our NWA, we knew that we still had some concerns, particularly in math, that we've been focused on. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been doing and trying to impact these results all along. We're going to start with English Language Arts. And what we have up here, just to describe it, we have our MPI, that's our Math Performance Index, looking at it and how that's scored. Essentially, if you're an advanced student, you get 5 points on that test. Proficient 4, basic 3, and below basic 1. So if we got every student in the district got an advanced, you'd get a score of 500. That would be the top. And if every student got below basic, we get a score of 100. So we definitely don't want to be anywhere around there. But looking at that, we wanted to provide you for, just to be able to index it a little bit, Missouri's MPI average, and then that PA is proficient and advanced, the percentage of students that are proficient and advanced, and then Missouri's percentage that are proficient and advanced. And then on the far right, we wanted to, Mr. Kaufman was stating, we wanted to show our NWA results, the summative spring scores. So what percentile our kids ended up overall on that grade level on that endpoint summative assessment in the spring of last year. So you could look across and see same grade level, same kids, what they scored on our NWA and our map, and then what the state did. Obviously, we don't have a state score on NWA. That's much more kind of a national, multiple districts, thousands of kids across multiple states. Take that. So looking in total in ELA, see the state MPI of 339.5, us being 20 points. I think that's honestly where we should expect to be. Even in math, and we're not there in math, so we're going to talk about that. But in English language arts, we had another solid year looking at our percent proficient advanced. I think it's important to note on the percentage proficient advanced, you might have some that are fairly close, like you'll see on grade 3, our Ray-Pec proficient advanced at 49, and the state average at 48.6. But the MPI is quite a bit higher than the state average MPI. Essentially, when you're just looking at proficient and advanced, you're leaving out those two bottom categories. So what that says is we had quite a few more students that scored in that basic rather than being in that below basic category that were found across the state. So that's why you can have a similar RP proficient advanced and MO proficient advanced, but the MPI, essentially what it does is it measures all levels of learner. So looking at that, as you move across, you do see, for example, that's an area that's a little bit a lower area, third grade, across even as showing on our NWEA. So look at the 58th percentile. That's still above the norm, okay? That's still above that mid-range percentile at 50%, but it's not quite as high as the other grade levels, 72, 79, 69, 75, 79. In English language arts, historically, we have a good plan. Our teachers execute the plan, and we tend to see pretty solid, strong results, starting from when they enter with us and grow throughout. We monitor our lexiles. We monitor multiple things. We have intervention plans. I think our goal and our effort is really to do the same thing in math that we've developed and have. And that was the reason why we've come to you and purchased the new resource. We've set that up 6-12. We've got it going in grades 1, 2, and 5. And next year we implement in 2, 3, and 4 and do the same thing that we really feel has worked in communication arts across the district. So looking at these scores, does anybody have any questions about English language arts as we look at that? Really good. We probably could have a little more conversation about math. You know, you tend to celebrate, say great, but then really what we focus our time on how to improve in the areas that we do. So if we scroll down and go to our math scores, just looking at total, this is all our kids in our district. The Missouri MPI was 307, our district's was 317, and what we consider to be not the strongest year for us. There are some reasons that we know of that we'll talk about briefly. And there are some reasons that we really do believe it has to do with our new shift to our new resources and the professional development that's still needed to implement those effectively, and then intervention as well. So looking at our proficient advanced, you'll see it's very similar to Missouri's proficient advanced, and all of these did decline, not just in Rainbow Peculiar, but they declined pretty much statewide when you're looking at those numbers. Look at our percentage, though. We have some very solid NWA scores in kindergarten and first grade looking at math, but then you'll see second, third, and then sixth as areas of concern. Third has been an area that I think we've needed to target. It's a foundational kind of math year when you're talking about our multiplication, and there's just so many keys. It does tend to be where 10 kids can begin to experience some math struggles. We'll have kids that at that grade level, you know, they've been working on mastering those the entire year, and they're just not getting it. And that's when your teachers and we begin to notice, and more intensive intervention is needed. What we're trying to do is work that down into grades 2 and 1 so we can catch them and support them before they get to that pivotal third grade year and say, oh. And once a student convinces themselves that they're not good at math, you're years to try and to make that back up. I mean, it is an innate kind of, I'm just not good at math. We just don't want to ever hear that again. We've got to work and fight to not hear that. So looking at fourth grade, fairly well, 340 to 307. Fifth grade, 311 to 308. So their fifth grade MAP scores. That was the one area you'll see the red, the tinged in red right there on the RP Proficient and Advanced, where it is below state average. And we should not be below state average, just at any grade level. We should not. Eighth grade's a little more difficult. It really is using the MAP test. In fact, I think the MAP test in eighth grade is a tough indicator. Look at our NWA percentile, 68%. In fact, at the secondary level, that's probably our highest percentile because that's testing all the eighth graders. Well, the 22.5 and the 265 for Ray-Pec are only eighth graders that are not our advanced math students. Okay, because our advanced math students are taking algebra, so they are not included in that score. And we have a large percentage of kids that take algebra too. So that really leaves students who have historically struggled a little more in math as the students that are determining our RPMPI in eighth grade. But when you scroll across, you say, well, do our eighth graders as a group, do they struggle in math? And the answer is no. What we're finding is the divide is kind of growing at a pace that we're not really happy about. So our advanced math students, when you look at just at eighth graders who are scoring on the Algebra 1 EOC are scoring very, very well. But our kids who are just in their eighth grade math course, their scores are slipping. So our top math students are achieving at a really high rate, but our students that are not in those top classes are not.
I'm not sure how to word my question to where it's the right way. So how do we catch those kids, though, that a year ago were showing that, and now we're almost a year later?
Mm-hmm. And that's the part that I was kind of hinting, or I just said it, when we're talking about our ELA results. When I look at our structures and our processes, or ELA, especially at the elementary level, they are consistent, they are practiced, the teachers are comfortable with them. And that's very important, that your teachers are comfortable with not only the tier 1, which is the basic level of instruction, but the teachers are comfortable with the intervention. And I'd say in general, in math, it is less so. There is less a level of comfort. You have a little more of that, I am comfortable teaching math and I am not as comfortable in teaching math. And if you poll the elementary teachers, I'd say the vast majority of them are more comfortable teaching English language arts, teaching reading acquisition and literacy. We're going to have to improve our efforts to train our teachers and to give them the professional development so they feel comfortable teaching math and intervening. We've got some that feel comfortable teaching math, but when students aren't achieving after that whole group lesson or after that, what to do next, and that's even at the secondary level, after talking with our really high quality teachers. Hey, this works. I don't know what to do with the 20% that it doesn't work with, because this is working with the vast majority. So that's what we're working on, and we're going to talk about kind of
So
the
those
plan.
interventions, though, would be for next year. So what can we do this semester?
Oh, we're doing now. We've started them now.
Okay.
Yeah, we've started them now. We've got these results. We've pulled these kids. We've got their NWA from the spring. That's why we appreciate the NWA. We've got their NWA from the fall and the winter, and we've got those intervention groups running and going.
We also have some supports this year that we didn't have last year. For instance, at the middle school, we did not have core resource math, which is our kind of our tier 2, tier 3 kind of thing. We do have core resource math at the middle school this year. And intervention time was new last year at the middle school, and just like anything that's brand new, you're kind of feeling your way through.
Learning it.
Whereas this year, when you're looking at intervention and the math teachers pulling in the groups, it's much more targeted. They have a better sense of where intervention is. So I think those two things we're going to see make some differences in our scores.
I agree. And we've added another. We came to you, remember, and added another core resource math teacher as well for next year, so we can increase that.
So that each building has a full-time
So each
instead
building
of
will have a
splitting.
full-time one.
You've got their NWA results back for fall and winter, or you've already got those?
Yes.
Is there a significant increase this year from last year?
It depends
or
what grade level. We still have.
I'm looking at middle school. I've been getting a lot of emails, texts, and everything from parents
I'll have to go back and check.
wanting tutors, teachers that have students that are in the middle school wanting tutors because They're not, the kids just seem confused.
I'll check middle school growth in general. I'd hate to be wrong and shoot you some numbers, but I can definitely see that. When looking anecdotally through the results, we had some grade levels that did show growth, and we're happy. And then we have some that we're still concerned with. And we're going to come back, and we have some very specific targeted professional development that we've planned for this summer. I do believe it is instructionally, once I've presented what has been my breadbasket lesson on this topic, and let's say 40% of my kids haven't mastered that, they don't have it, our concern is what's next. Well, often I think that hasn't been answered.
What are the teachers saying is, why are they uncomfortable with it, or why are they not comfortable with that?
Are they not comfortable with the curriculum, or what are they not comfortable with?
I think it's a challenge, guys. When we were talking about, we coming out of math teacher preparatory, you might have one class in college regarding math instruction, teaching math at the elementary level. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Hoffman, but that's usually correct. And then coming in, it takes multiple years. And as we've changed, to 3 or 4 assessments, if we've changed, we're just bringing on a new resource, we had to assume there was going to be some learning curve. Now, as looking at the other people that are bringing on the same resource that we just brought on last year, I'm not worried that the resource is going to be, well, it does take time to learn those things. We have to provide that support. Our teachers are hardworking. They are good teachers, but it doesn't matter. You can be an incredibly hardworking, great teacher. It still takes time to learn it and implement it well. And I would say teachers in general at the elementary level are more comfortable teaching literacy.
I've come to you before about, where I don't like bringing my kids into it, but I'm going to this time. I've got one that scores very high in math, and you know that. He comes to me saying how much of a struggle it is, and I let you know this, about how much of a struggle it is to try to do all of his work on a Chromebook
Yeah.
for math. He's like, how can you do all your math on the Chromebook? He likes the paper and pencil. And I know you've kind of told me kind of what you guys have planned for that, but he's even gone so far into showing me, like, look, I get to choose 3 times before my answer's selected in there, and so it's kind of like playing the game, getting it down to 50-50 before you can even select it in. But he's concerned about how much of a struggle it is to do all the math on a Chromebook and not having a workbook or having worksheets or having pen and pencil. And I don't know if that could be
It is something we are looking
a
at.
huge
It could
part
be
of
an issue.
why the scores are down, is everything has to be done on Chromebook. We have to have the curriculum on a Chromebook, the worksheets on a Chromebook, everything's here instead of actually putting pen to paper and doing it
Well, I think
conventional way.
To Billy's point, even when a professor in college is breaking down a math problem on the board, he's breaking it on the board and figuring out to the end on the board with something in his hand.
Right.
Or her hand.
Right.
And
No, we don't disagree. I think it's just a point of conversation. How do you blend that? You can have, as Billy and I were talking about, you can have your resource online and still at the same time have the expectation that your students write out the problems and work them and even turn that in. I was talking with Dr. Hoffman about the elementary level, same thing. She's requested that we look at resources that are, would require exactly that.
I would be all for it.
So, no, we are looking at all. We're not very closed-minded group. We are absolutely what's going to help our kids. We're going to figure it out. I do believe our math scores, our teachers will be more comfortable with our new resource. I do believe that. I do believe that they will take the professional development and run with it. I also believe our math achievement will increase. Some of the levels, I'm going to highlight it, but if we can scroll down so we can see Algebra 2, I'd appreciate it. This is an example of some nuances with assessment that you have to be careful. Whoa. Right there. Yeah, Algebra 2. So your Algebra 2 scores, when you look at them, look pretty abysmal. And that's low enough to impact our overall MPI, certainly impact the high school's MPI. It made it look like the high school. What happened? Well, when digging in, you got to remember you've got sophomores and juniors taking that test. Come to find out, this assessment, the teachers knew and the kids knew that they weren't going to get the results back in time for it to be any type of impactful for their assessment. Couldn't
For their
count.
final.
Couldn't count towards their final. Couldn't count towards their grade. In the testing day and in the schedule, these students didn't test with their Algebra 2 teachers. They were pulled out. Just to get the test done, we're taken in other rooms. We pulled some results. I pulled them by individual kids. Then we had great math students that had been advanced on everything. All of a sudden, they're below basic. They got 1 out of 5 questions right. Pull their ACT scores. They got like a 25, 26 on the math portion, 28 on the math portion of their ACT. All of a sudden, they're below basic? No. They're in high school. And they figured it did not count towards their grade. And didn't count towards their final, didn't count towards anything. Well, in the past, it has, because we get the results back. With the new assessment, the kids, everybody knew they weren't getting the results back in time. Did that make a big difference on the MPI? Yes.
So what can we do to help with that?
We're changing back.
We'll get the results.
We'll get the
in time.
results back in time. If you tell a high school student this counts towards your final, they'll do it. Especially if this doesn't impact them in any way. I mean, how often do we as parents even look at their Algebra 2 EOC score? I'd say maybe not very often. So students know that. They're 10th and 11th graders. So we think that fix will be pretty immediate. But did that impact our math MPI? Yes.
Traditionally, that's been one of our highest
Oh
scoring
yeah, we
areas.
get 400.
Which is what you need at the end of the process when they're taking that last assessment, whether it's the ACT
Yeah.
or the EOC. That's when we want them to score the best.
Yeah,
in their
think about a
academic
grade
career.
level that might score 400, and we on our overall got a 289. Yes. Is that going to change things? Yes. So do I think that'll immediately change overall MPI? Yes. But that's just one piece, and I'm not blaming everything on that. You know, we live and we learn when I was talking to Mr. Miller. So, going on, I think this is just as interesting and shows, if we scroll down to our special programs. Looking at, this is English Language Arts, ELL, our English as a Second Language learners, our IEP students, and our free and reduced lunch students, and our super subgroup. When you look at the state averages and you look at our special program populations, you see that our special program populations score quite a bit better than the state average in English Language Arts. Our IEP students, proficient and advanced, is about the same as the state average, but then you're looking at a 13, 14 point difference on the MPI, and that's the one that is the closest.
All students, too.
Yeah, all students as well. But looking at that, you'll see it was kind of eye-opening looking at the map, because we saw the same thing. See how much closer they are, except our ELL population, who does very well compared to the state average in math as well. See how much closer they are to the state average across the board. So it really did say it didn't matter what population, what subgroup, what area our kids were looking at when regarding math, it was all of them. It wasn't just one group, which when you look at it, that can be bad and good. I mean, it really looks like if you implement your plan with fidelity across all kids, Tier 1 instruction, if you have an intervention that approaches kids where they are and gradually moves them regarding their math skills in a very similar manner that we do English Language Arts, then we can impact everybody. So we've got work to do in math. There is no doubt. When you scroll down a little more on this, you will see all of our buildings. So these are all, put my glasses back on. These are all our building scores in ELA. So if you're looking, that's Math Proficient Advanced, and that's our MPI scores. Once again, very solid. A couple schools, we know what we're going to have to give more attention, effort, focus. I've already met with those principals. Oh, yes.
Say, have we been able to do anything this year, though, before we even knew this, that will have helped? I
I
just hate to feel like we've lost this whole year.
No, I do not think I think our resource work and what we did in the summer, we did math resource work in the summer that will help this year. Do I think we still need to do more? Yeah, remember, this is all last year.
Right.
Do I think we need to do more? Yes. And you're going to see some things, and we'll probably continue to present things to the board. Hey, some of them will just be on a budget request or, would be on consent. We're purchasing these math manipulatives. We're purchasing these workbooks. You'd see those. You might not be as apparent as positions or something, but it's definitely to support math. So looking at that, if you scroll down, what you'll find is building scores. They ranked about the same. If you struggled in ELA, when you're looking across all our buildings, you also struggled on math. That doesn't surprise me. Often it has to do with focused efforts. It could be number of new teachers. It can be collaboration time efforts. It can be all sorts of things that when we go in, how's your intervention plan working? For example, I think Eagle Glen's a good example. And I'm not trying to make excuses for anyone, Eagle Glen, anyone. But when you take a building and essentially they are second year building, working through quite a bit of change in enrollment, quite a bit of growth, are you going to take longer to establish your structures and processes? Yes, even when you say, okay, we sit down, we're going to model them off the others, we're going to do it. Putting it in practice is much more difficult systemically and well than just saying this is our plan. And it takes time, and it takes people working together. So do I think they'll improve? Yes, they're very focused. Ms. Jones is very down to business.
I understand your logic there, but when we've got a 22-point gap or 24-point gap between two buildings, how can we have that big of a gap when everybody was new last year to everything?
Why? Everybody was new. They were truly, okay, how do I explain this?
Let me try that.
Bridle Ridge was a new elementary school.
It was.
They were mostly
but-
Shoal.
But we brought nearly an
We brought
intact
everybody
staff
from
together,
Shoal.
whereas
Yes,
Eagle Glen
understand.
had the disadvantage of having to bring staff members from all across the
Every
district,
building,
so
they had new teams.
More
Creedmoor,
impact there.
weren't they just as reorganized?
just
Not
more
really.
just teachers leaving, but hardly
The
very few new
building that
ones.
was truly reorganized, guys, was Eagle Glen.
Does it have anything to do with the demographics of Eagle Glen?
It has to do with lots of things. With changing enrollment, I'd say new to our district, a little more transient. All of those things play
Probably a
into it.
contributing factor.
Yes. Yeah. We have to use this as last year's results and last year's, where we end up this year, our efforts this year, what we're going to do this summer, and that's what I really like to hit on. Our action plan with math really is focused on all three levels of learner. So tier 1, you're talking about all kids. We have started instructional walkthroughs with our principals that are focused on math instruction, the fidelity and the quality of our implementation in math. Going deeper, how we can better support our teachers, and finding the professional development that's needed. That's really what we've been doing. Tier 2 is that building-wide intervention. What we found, Ruth, is that we would have a building-wide intervention, and we'd have it in one building this way, and it would be addressing math this way, and it might be working or might not. We'd go to the next building and they'd have a tier 2 intervention plan addressing math differently, approaching it with different kids, maybe not using the same level of staff resources, things like that. We said we can't do that. We have to be consistent. Because if we're not consistent across that, then we can't go back and know why those results were what they were. And then I can't come back and say, hey, I need another math interventionist at these two buildings, and this is what, and we've tried everything else. So we've got to make it consistent first. And then tier 3, we have placed 2 new teacher associates at the buildings that were Eagle Glen, for example. With those, we are training all of our teacher associates on math intervention and how to do that effectively, being very structured, and looking at student data and driving those intervention groups in a way that we've almost always done in ELA, but haven't done at the same level in math. So another important emphasis has been our math professional development. Right now, we started virtual professional development with our K1 and 5th grade teachers who are now implementing that new curriculum. We have professional development that we have lab teachers in grades 2, 3, and 4 who will be implementing fully next year that are working with their own team to jumpstart it, to be ready to go.
Who does the math PD? Do we do it internally or?
Most of it's done internally. We got Carrie Penny, Kim Scholl, Dr. Hoffman works closely with them, Dr. Barr works closely with them. We have and are looking, we have some great experts around the metro. Kathy Battle's an example, that we are hoping to use their resources, to take advantage of them in a positive way. So I know that sounded bad. We really are, with our training, realize that instructional leadership component. So we are in the summer, we've got the new grade levels going during grades 2, 3, and 4. We're going to bring our K1 and 5 to go deeper with math instruction. And we've realized we've got to get our principals at a higher level of comfort with the math curriculum. So we are going to do a principals admin training on June 11th and 12th, 2 full days on math instruction, what we need to look for. And then we have a Eureka Lead Team work session. And then we're going to do a secondary boot camp. We're going to do a math boot camp this summer. And we're looking at most likely focusing at the middle level with some emphasis at the 9-12 as well. But I think that boot camp will focus a lot on middle school math. So those are the efforts. Those are our plans. We're always open to more, and we're going to continue to look to see what we need to do. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? I know it was a lot. We will get to work. We will not stop. We will figure out every nuance and then continue to work it until our kids are achieving where we want them to. And we'll make it count as part of the final into high school. Because you really need to do that.
Is the boot camp going to be for everybody? Like principals, teachers?
Math, just math.
Well, just math.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
just math. But is it going to be for elementary through?
Elementary is doing Dr. Hoffman's kind of boot camp. This was I don't know if I just gave it a name. I didn't mean to give it a name like that. It's not her boot camp. But they are already doing 2 days of professional development. This would be a new professional development for our secondary that we have
Okay.
not done in the past.
Okay.
We've never done that before. So this would be something new.
Were we talking about the ACT stuff on this?
Yep.
Oh, Dr. Barr.
Yep. So we'll switch to ACT. This is the senior highlights. So this is the class of 2017, or 2018 results for the class of 2018. This is the last class. If you remember, for a short while, the state paid for the test for every student. And so this is the last class that had that from the state. And so what we did with these results, we tested over 94% of our kids on this test, which is a huge amount, a huge percentage of kids. And you'll see a little bit later kind of how that stacks up and compared to other districts on how many kids they tested. Our overall composite score, according to ACT, is 20.4. Now, ACT does look at the student's most recent ACT score. So when you look at our state results that they say that we have a 20.8, and that's because the state looks at the student's best score. So there's going to be a discrepancy on what you see. But we went with the ACT for this because that's who gives us all these other information. So I'm going to scroll through pretty quickly. As you can see, the scores by area, there's 4 major areas: English, math, reading, science, and then STEM. They look at kind of a combination of math and science. And you can see our scores for Ray-Pec are in the black, state is in the gold, and you can see that in all areas we are exceeding the state average, which is good, which is definitely where we want to be. If you scroll down to the second page, college readiness benchmarks. So ACT has college readiness benchmarks, and those benchmarks are supposed to be a predictor that a student who meets that benchmark has a 50% chance of attaining a B or higher in a corresponding college course. And so what they've done over the years is looked at what are kids' average ACT scores and then what are actually their grade in higher ed in that first year of math, and then they've kind of determined here are the cut scores. So the cut scores for every benchmark is different depending on the subject. So for instance, in English, it's 18, which is why that's in parentheses, but for math, it's 22, And for science, it's 23. So the benchmarks are all different, which is why you'll see different percentages of kids reaching those benchmarks because there's higher scores in some areas. But you will see that in the 4 core areas, we did score above the state. We did slip just a little in looking at STEM. That STEM score is a 26. So it's a pretty rigorous benchmark that they have. This is, I believe, the second year that they've actually done the STEM results for us, so that's a fairly new
Are we able
one.
to tell if the new Project Lead the Way classes and stuff that we have is going to be similar enough in strands to get us better on this one?
We would have to probably do that kid by kid, looking at who's enrolled in the coursework and seeing kind of what results that they make. If you'll scroll briefly down to page 3, this is just a correlation ACT provides on how our kids would do if they would take the work keys. So the work keys is that whole, are they work ready? And they give certain medals, kind of gold, silver, bronze. And you can kind of see where we are 1% behind on gold or higher. However, we more than make that up on our silver, and we're definitely less bronze. So in the top 2 tiers, we're definitely higher than the state. Our next results look at course taking patterns. This one, students have to self-report, and so there's always, some discrepancy there. And then obviously you can see with the 29% who said core or more and 11% who said less than core that not all our kids filled out that part. It's an optional part. I can assure you that we do have more than 40% of our kids taking courses in there. And so we are really only looking at about a 40% reporting. But what ACT will tell you is that more students who take the core or more, so the higher level courses, the better that they will score. And our scores definitely reflect that our kids who really push themselves and take those harder courses end up scoring better on the ACT than students who do not take the core or more. So for example, in science, they would say ACT would like you to take at least 3 sciences, possibly 4. And if you take 4, you tend to do better in science, for example, than if you took 3. So, which kind of makes sense, and we definitely flush that out. This is also the same. If you scroll down it looks at the college readiness benchmarks, and you'll find the exact same thing. Kids who take more rigorous coursework, quite frankly, more college-geared coursework, are going to do better on the ACT overall. So the more that we can have those kids in those upper level classes, the better their scores are going to turn out. The reporting categories, which is the next page, this is more for teachers to look at. This is also new. This is the second year ACT has done this. So in the past, ACT, you just saw kind of the previous scores and you kind of look great. I don't know what that means. Now ACT actually breaks it down on where our kids are in certain areas. So for example, in English, it looks at the writing production, the knowledge of language, the conventions, and we can kind of see where we score in comparison to the state. So this is really more for our teachers to look at to see what are those areas that we're really strong in and what are those areas that maybe we need to work a little more on with our students as they're preparing for that particular assessment. We could scroll 2 pages down to the gender analysis. This is just more kind of, they provide their information, so it's just kind of always curious to see, do we, do our males perform better in some areas and our females perform better in others? You can see that our males are higher in math and science, our females are higher in ELA and reading. That's pretty typical, honestly. And so, but overall, they get pretty close to each other in the end with a 0.3 difference as their composite. And the same thing happens on the next page with the college readiness benchmarks. We're real close in all of the areas, which it'd be great if they were all equal, but it's good to be close in those. And the final thing that they do provide us some information on is those top planned majors. This is something we really look at as we apply for those career ed grants that I came to you last month about. This is something that they ask for as evidence that there's actually interest in those areas. And this has been very consistent since I have been here. So for 6 years strong, our kids are interested in health science, engineering, the general sciences, and business. And also very consistently, the vast majority of our kids are interested in attaining a bachelor's degree or more. And so that's, like I said, been consistent. The only other document I have about ACT is the Metro ACT comparison. You can see where we land, at 20.8, but also that percentage of what we test, which is a 94.3 is what we tested. And you can see some districts are a little higher, some districts are a little lower on who they're testing. But that kind of shows kind of where we rank overall. I will say that last year, we had the students take the test that we provided for the junior year, and we were really focusing more on right kid, right test, so that they really are taking the right test. And this year, that's again a focus on really right kid, right test. Mr. Miller's done some surveying with the kids on really what do you want to do in life, and then he's suggested a test. And then any student who wants to change that had to sit down either with me or Mr. Miller and kind of make their case. And there were some kids that I was like, you're right. They were like, I want to take a dual credit now, so I need the ACT score. Great. I had one student saying, I'm going into the military. I'm like, then you need to take the ASVAB, which is what you were signed up for. So we need you to stick with that. So we kept some, but we changed others. So I think we're really going to have in the future kids truly getting results that they can actually use, as opposed to some of them just thinking they needed to take it. Like my kid in the military, who I'm like, no, you need to take the ASVAB, and if that's where you're going to go. So I think we'll continue to have that better fit.
So this comparison is going to change, obviously, starting with this next round of results, because you as a board thankfully supported paying for a student to take the test as a junior if they want to take the ACT or one of the other tests. You continued on the practice that the state had offered the 2 years prior. Not every district did that. So we're going to see a lot more variability of percentage of participation. It won't be up in the 90s for every district. You're going to find districts maybe down in the 50s and 60s, and others that stayed up into the 80s and maybe even 90%. My guess is we'll be in the 70 to 80% range, somewhere in there, which the effect of that is typically your average score is going to go up at the same time, because, the kids are selecting more of their career path, and it's more the college-bound kids that are looking at the ACT as their test of choice. So this metric will be a little harder to be comparable in the future when a district might have much fewer kids
When the
tested.
state paid for it, we had to test everybody that could test.
That's right.
And-
We offered to everybody, and there were a
And
few
now
that,
that we're paying for it,
It's
it's
their
whoever wants
choice.
to
Yes.
take it.
Right.
So we will see the percentage go
right.
down.
But we, at the same time, we were offering an alternative as well, ASVAB, work keys, acuplacer, so that depending on where they want to go, that test might make more sense for them. So that's a credit to you guys for helping sponsor that and make that happen.
Any questions?
All right, strategic, I'm sorry, did you want something, Paul?
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, strategic plan data review.
Okay, there are a total of 4 documents in the board docs this evening, but we're going to focus on 2 of them, and we're going to jump to the scorecard because it kind of encompasses the goal statements that are included in that first document that's in there. And so just a little context, a little history here. We approved our strategic plan in December of 17. That became the impetus for what became Prop RP to try to help gain additional resources to support that plan. But with our previous strategic plan back in 2014, we developed a scorecard, and the scorecard measured some goals that we wanted to track over time. And this is really, at a very high level, just a continuous improvement monitoring tool. That's really all it's intended to be. We're picking out some measures that we can get good data on, and then tracking that over time to see how we do against some pretty high benchmarks. And so in that goals document, we've created some different goal statements with some pretty high measures in terms of what we want to accomplish by the end of 2022, which is how far this current strategic plan is scheduled to go. So that's part of a 5-year continuous improvement effort that we're going to track over time with these various measures. And our hope is that we've picked measures that will be stable enough that we can track them over time effectively. Like we had the ACT goal of a 23 average ACT with 80% tested under the old plan. And then when the state started offering it to all students, suddenly the average went down, the participation went way up. Well, we know now that's going to go back and change again. So we've tried to picture that in our mind as we set up some goals. The way the scorecard lays out, it's on a 1 to 10 scale, with the 7 being our goal. So if we can get our average score, or most of our scores, over to the 7 by the end of this 5-year period, we'll have made real progress, real academic and learning progress across the district. And we're measuring a lot of different things. But on the left-hand side, we're breaking it down based on our focus area in our strategic plan. So the first 13 measures are related to success-ready students. Then I believe there are about 7 measures related to high-quality staff. And then there are another 5 measures related to financial responsibility. And then at the bottom, there are 5 other measures that we just wanted to continue measuring because we thought they were important to support all the rest of it. our strategic plan committee, which consists of Ruth and Billy, and prior to this year, I think Kim York and Kim Bailey were in that group with Ruth. We started looking at those draft goal statements, and we started drafting a scorecard. But the reality is, until we could get all of this state APR data and the information that goes with it, we couldn't finish this until just recently. So we just now, February 1st, with the release of all that data, we have been able to update this to where we've got current data points for all 30 of these measures, if you will. So at the top half, I'll just kind of walk you through some of the student success measures. And so obviously we're going to look at MAP and we're going to look at ELA and math. We are not looking at science or social studies, in part because science was a field test this year and we didn't get results. Social studies is going to be a field test next year and we're not going to get results. And they're testing a more limited number of our students. Social studies is just one grade level at the high school. Science is just 3 different grade levels. So we're much more limited in our sample there. But we are picking up subgroup achievement in math and ELA, which we hadn't done before, and I think that's a good thing. We've got ACT, composite, and participation rate. Our NWEA growth is one that we now have a more local measure on a stable test assessment that we can use. And basically that one, you assume 50% growth, meeting 50% meeting their growth target would be the standard, and we're trying to get it to 60% on average if we can. Our graduate credentials, that's been a really nice growth area for us. When we first measured that a couple years ago, we were down in the 50% of kids that were getting something beyond their diploma while they're with us, and that has steadily grown to where we're at 84% now. We're going to try to get it to 90%, and those are kids that are earning something, AP, IB, dual credit, an IRC or a TSA assessment or work keys certificate. So any of those would qualify as Diploma Plus, and that number has grown. So that's probably a high point on what we've measured here. Then we have survey questions. The educational quality is on our stakeholder surveys of parents and staff members. And then I think it was Kim York's suggestion last spring that we add some student survey questions. So items 11, 12, and 13 on there are perceptions from student surveys about whether or not they receive academic supports when they need them, social emotional supports when they need them, or do we provide them real-world learning opportunities? And those are all components of our strategic plan. So those measures are included. Then we get to the high-quality staff. We've got staff retention for both our certified and classified staff, goals there. Our staff perceived value, which is another significant growth area. That was in the low 3s whenever we first started surveying staff several years ago, and now we're getting to the high 3s, and it's been showing growth almost every year. Competitive teacher salary, we know we're low there. We know that was part of what Prop RP is going to address. What I will tell you is the data that we're collecting is a year old, so that would have been last year's data. This year's data won't be available till next fall, so it'll be reported next time when we've actually made some improvement in that range, we hope. Percent of teachers with advanced degrees, and then staff perception on their professional development opportunities. So those are under that high-quality staff component. Under the financial responsibility, we've got a fund balance target, fund balance percentage target, transparency survey on our financial operations, which took a huge jump last year, in part because of our Prop RP trying to inform our public about our financial situation and our details that go with that. An overview or perception of our facility upkeep. A new one is the community partnerships that we might have and public perception of that and whether or not that's effective. And then a benchmarking question. We're going to come to benchmarking here in just a little bit. We want to look out not just at what we're doing, but how are we comparing against other districts, both in the metro and statewide. So we're looking at multiple measures on that. And then those general stakeholder questions at the bottom. We want to make sure we're addressing and monitoring school safety, quality of our communication, the reporting of our plans and progress, our technology used for instruction, and then our leadership as a board and administrative team to support student learning. So those all come from our patron survey, parent-patron staff surveys from the spring. So got 30 wide-ranging measures here, and you take the score as it is right now with this configured, and we're just under a 4 rating. And when we started in 2014 with this process and the old strategic plan, we were starting at just about the same spot. I think it was 3.96, and then we tried to we got it moved over around 5 or 5.5. before the clock ran out and we had to start the process over again. So my hope is that by the time we get to the end of our current strategic plan, we'll get this average score up to a 7. Knowing that there could be a few of these metrics that change because of outside impact, like the ACT did a couple years ago. So we've intentionally set these goals fairly high. And the ones that we do have measures that are more of a state comparable measure, we've marked those with that pink box, if you will, just to show that, state average is a 1 or a 2 in most cases. We expect to be quite a bit higher than that in terms of what we're measuring for ourselves. So this has kind of been an ongoing project for about a year now to get this put together, and we finally have all the data points to do this. And generally what we'll do is look at it in the fall, once we have everything completed for the prior year, and we'll look at it once in the summertime after we do all of our spring survey and get all those results. We'll kind of look at this twice a year. It's kind of been our practice. So there's a ton of detail there. Any questions I could tackle for you this evening before we look at our comparability group? My cabinet team gives me grief because I kind of geek out on this data stuff, but this is the underlying premise. The underlying premise here is we spent some time years ago focusing on Baldrige continuous improvement practices and having measurable outcomes as part of that mindset of continuous improvement and growth. And so if we don't measure some of these things, it's going to be hard for us to tell if we're making progress. And hopefully they're closely enough connected to our strategic plan that the important work that we're doing is going to support growth in these areas. There is a second page to that sheet that actually goes into the detailed explanation of what's in that measure, so that if you ever need to reference that, I know it's pretty jargon laden, but it's the stuff we work with on an everyday basis. I think what might be of more interest, Michelle, is if you switch over to our peer groups. We actually have developed 2 different peer groups for reviewing, one being a statewide one and one being our Kansas City metro area districts. If you recall back in the spring when we were talking about Prop RP, we had a list of 20 districts that we compared ourselves with on teacher salary and tax rate and things of that sort. This metro group is those same 20 districts that we would look at and track our information over time. And so basically what we've done is identify 13 different measures that we can get good, reliable data on, again, and can track them over time. And most of this comes off of all of it either comes off the APR report for every district or their state report card, which has a variety of other data that's included on it that gets published by DESE. So it's all coming from DESE website sources. The first 2 columns are our math and ELA scores each spring. The next 2 are the ACT scores and participation rate that we've talked about already. The 5th column is the college and career readiness percentage indicator. That's one of the indicators under college and career readiness on the APR. So we've been able to pull that off other districts' APRs for comparison purposes. Graduation percentage, attendance percentage, and then in this case, it's not the overall percentage, but the percentage of students who attend at least 90% of the time, which is the measure the state looks at. Average teacher salary is a very important one that we definitely want to track over time because of the additional resources we're putting there to try to close some gaps. Average teacher experience would tell you, how many years they have in the teaching profession. Percent of teachers with advanced degrees, again, kind of translates into that overall teacher quality piece. And then the last 3 are what I would consider inverted measures, in that having a lower number is better and a higher number is considered not as good. So the rankings are flipped on those. Students per teacher, the expenditure per pupil, and our total tax levy. And I will point out that all of the data in this chart are from last school year, 17-18. So when you look at like average teacher salary, what we did for salary schedules this year is not shown here because that won't show up until we do this reporting next fall. Okay, so what we've done then is go across each one of those, and out of those 20 districts, where do we rank, with 20th being the best score and 1 being the lowest score. And you'll see as you go across there, in ELA, we're above the group. If you're in that 10-11 range, you're kind of in the middle. We're just below on math. We're pretty decent on ACT overall and college and career readiness. Graduation percentage, we've had a couple years of dip, but it started to go back up again. So I'm optimistic that that number is going to continue to grow. Attendance generally has been pretty good. Average teacher salary is one of our weakest areas. And we know that. That was part of our emphasis on Prop RP. And you'll notice when you look at the gaps, it's going to be hard to pass many districts, but I think we can certainly close the gap because, that there are a few districts right around us in Pleasant Hill and Grain Valley. We've kind of been leapfrogging back and forth over each other the last couple of years. My hope is that we can get on past them and start closing the gap to that next tier that's up around that $55,000 average. So hopefully in a couple of years we can make a serious dent in that. Average teacher experience speaks to a variety of things, but retention's one of those. So hopefully good retention efforts will help that over time. And salary is just a portion of that. There's a lot of other things that contribute to that. The students per teacher, you've already added a half dozen positions for next year, and we're going to be bringing some more to you to consider in March, and that will help that. But we're a growing district, so that's going to be a curve that we have to keep up with over time. Expenditure per pupil, we're really low in cost, which give us a high ranking, and we all know from Prop RP that we had an extremely low tax levy compared to the rest of the metro, and that's what's showing here. It does not reflect our new levy. Again, that will be reported next year when we do that. When you put all those together, our average ranking puts us at the 56th percentile. Our goal is to get it to the 70th percentile. Knowing that all these other districts are trying to improve at the same time, so their numbers are going to move at the same time we're trying to move our numbers. And so that, it really, though, gives us a comprehensive view of kind of how we stack up with the rest of the metro schools. So got work to do there, but I think everything that we talk about and work on contributes to that. Back in September, we kind of gave you the priorities for this year that we're working on, and administratively and collectively as a staff, we're still working towards those efforts that we gave you back in that September work session to try to focus on that continuous improvement over time. I mentioned the benchmark here is to try to get this to 70th percentile. The other document that's in there is a statewide peer group, and it includes 20 districts from across the state that might be probably more similar to us than even the metro peer group, because when you get 500 districts to pick from, the range of both size and differences in demographics are not quite as large. So we didn't rank quite as high. I think we were at the 47th percentile with that group, 46th percentile. So again, we've got room to grow, but with that group, we would expect to be at the 50th percentile. So we need to get that one definitely above the 50th percentile. If not higher in the metro peer group, we want to get to the 70th percentile. Ton of data there, and again, I don't know if there's any specific questions you might have, but I'll do my best to try to help answer those with a little help from our team here. Anything come to mind that we could help you with?
Where do you anticipate salary-wise? Where do you think?
So based on the increase we made, I would suspect our average salary is going to go up by maybe as much as $1,500 for this next measurement. Did we add 1,500 to the base? Yeah. So we added 1,500 to the base of the schedule last year. Some of that gets offset by turnover, where some advanced staff might leave and we hired in somebody that may not have had as much on the many years of experience or graduate degrees. But by the same token, we have some staff members that move over because they've earned an advanced degree. So maybe not quite 1,500, but probably something close to that, I hope. And then, we're still working in that budget development process. We'll be back to you in March with some scenarios to look at, but hopeful that we can do something close to that again this year for next year, if when we do our schedules this spring. But just looking at that, it's going to be hard to catch those districts that are $5,000 ahead of us even in 2 years. But if we can close that gap, I think that's going to help us tremendously, both recruitment and retention wise.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you guys for all your hard work. It was a lot of work you guys put into this, and we truly do appreciate it. Meeting adjourned.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.